Welcome. Thanks, everybody. Believe it or not, this is our sixth episode of the year. We're getting right through it. And this afternoon, we're going to be talking about digital citizenship technology and probably our first part of artificial intelligence, which, after doing a bit of reading, I think is, a enormous topic. We probably won't even touch on even a bare minimum of it. But my name is Don Taylor. I work at Main Street Middle School, and I teach sustainability. I'm also on the faculty of the Middle Grades Collaborative. This work is sponsored by the Collaborative. And before I ask our contributors to introduce themselves, I would like to just make sure everybody knows that on March 9th, the Middle Grades Conference is happening at the University of Vermont. It's a great way to reconnect with folks and to kind of get recharged. I was just talking with Kevin briefly before we started here, and it's that time of year where getting recharged is pretty important. So I'll let our contributors introduce themselves, and why don't we start with Meg O'Donnell, and then Meg, when you're done, you can pass it to the next person.
Sure. Thank you, Don. Good to see you. Meg O'Donnell. I teach humanities to 7th and 8th graders here at Shelburne Community School. And Kev, I'll pass it right to you.
Hi, everybody, Kevin Pioli-Hunt. I'm a 5'8" generalist on Swift House at Wilson Central School. I'll send it over to Katie.
Hi, Katie Farber, assistant professor at St. Mike's, also faculty on middle grades, she, her pronouns, and happy to be here.
All right, so before we get going, and we were just talking about being recharged, and I think it's really important to stay optimistic, especially based on the kind of the weather that we've been having and all that sort of February thing. So real quick, again, we'll start with Meg. What has been a glow this week, and maybe an area, a grow area, a glow and a grow?
Oh, I love that, Don. Let's see. A glow has been, we just finished today our second round of fishbowl conversations that students were having around just the research that they've been working on. And I was really proud of them. They had a lot to say about their topics, and it was fascinating. So that was definitely a glow. And a grow is, I'm loving the extended daylight, but I haven't found a great way to get outside enough. And so I'm going to be doing some of that this weekend, which I'm excited about, but I need to get outside more. Do you want me to pass it to somebody?
I can hop on. So a glow for me, I was actually talking to Don about this because his daughter was involved, but a small group of our students who are in a leadership group got to go down to the Capitol, and they were part of a protest and marching on banning certain, like, the flavored vapes, and they were on the news. So we showed that in our Kiva, which was great to celebrate them. So that was just one of those, like, kind of proud moments, just that seeing our students take initiative and be part of those groups, and also share out with our students here about what they're doing. And grow for me, I keep telling myself, like, I need to get more timely with some feedback stuff. And now we got break coming up. I'm like, oh boy, we're under it now. So I need to make sure I'm getting stuff back in time before that break happens. So that's something I'm focusing on. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you. I'm thinking about my mostly freshman students in education in the 21st century class, and we're finishing up our first unit on equity, and one of the glows, I think, is just the way that they're talking to each other and the way they're grappling with a lot of new ideas. And they've all just read books that we've talked about a lot on here before, the Common Read selection, and they've picked these books and really engaged in great discussion. It's challenging for some folks for the first time. So that's been awesome. But then I'm with you, Kevin. I have a whole slate of feedback that I need to get them today so that they can work on a paper that's due Monday, because I want them to have that time to, like, process the feedback. But I'm thinking, oh yeah, that needs to happen today. So I feel you on that timely feedback. It's just, it's so much easier to say and so much harder to do.
All right, I would, I guess mine's in a little bit different direction. I had a meeting this morning. There's a science teacher down at Woodstock her job sounds really cool. She works at Woodstock High School, but she also partners with the National Park Service. And she is starting an informal citizen science maple sugaring project. And so I met with there were 6 other teachers on the call. And some of the stuff that people are doing are just awesome, like farm to school coordinator, outdoor activities, farm and food studies. It just sounded really interesting. And that kind of that got my antenna up, and that kind of stuff gets me engaged and it gets me motivated. And then we went out this afternoon and we actually tapped our trees, so we're kind of headed in that direction. So that's kind of my glow. My grow is, this is something that Katie Farber says all the time. I am not a product of my to-do lists, but right now everybody's so busy that it seems like you're just trying to get through your days, and that's not the best way to go through things. But it's check this, check this, check this, and so I'm trying to avoid that and trying to embrace uh, embrace what's out there. So thank you all again for taking the time. I'm going to start our conversation about digital citizenship, and I'm just going to sort of read this statement, and I may be wrong in my recollections, and if I am, please correct them. If I do remember correctly, before the pandemic, there was, and we're talking like the late 2010s, 2018, 2019, there was a significant push to get students in one-to-one device situations. Having kids with their own machine, their own Chromebook, had the promise of a lot of evolution in the way we teach and the access and resources. And there was also an emphasis on digital citizenship and using the technology correctly. Much of this got amplified or exacerbated by the call, which is, I think, 4 years ago in a few weeks, when schools were closed and everybody needed to go online. And rather than a measured, structured rollout, people were given the computers, kids were given the computers and told, okay, it's time to start teaching online. And students and teachers were placed in a predicament of teaching online, and it became essential. And since that time, since we've returned to classrooms, at least in my experience, it seems that technology and students have not been, it hasn't worked the way we envisioned it working. There's a lot of distraction. There's a lot of lack of focus. There's a lot of issues having kids staying engaged. And I just wanted to start our discussion with this idea of what are you seeing in terms of your students with technology? And then I want to move the conversation, if we can, into how's AI, pushing on sort of those things that you're already seeing, right? And so I'll just start with one example. Yesterday, I asked students to do a reflection about the concept of sustainability. And this was with 5th graders. And one of the students simply opened a new tab, Googled sustainability, copied and pasted it into the Google Classroom response. And the only reason I knew that was happening was that their table mate said, "You're not supposed to copy and paste the answer." And so that's just the most recent example. And I guess, why don't we start with Kevin and then Katie and then Meg? What are you experiencing with technology in the classroom, and how is it going for you?
Yeah, we have, similar instances to that, Don, where I feel like we have to do a lot of teaching just around a reminding around proper use and digital citizenship, specifically around, like, if you copy and paste something, like appropriate ways of quoting and sorting and citing. Especially, we just finished like our big independent project unit where students picked their own topic, which meant they had to access a lot of different sources to get that information across. So I feel like every year it's just like a reminder to us of how important it is that we just keep drilling that home, like, again and again. Like, they really can't hear it enough. And it's I wish there was more like empirical data around this, but it just seems like every single year the attention span's just getting shorter and shorter and shorter. It's like the second those Chromebooks are open, you just kind of know, like, there's going to be a good percentage of your kids that have a different tab open and trying to, some of it's functional, some of it's like just kind of looking up something that's interesting to them, which is great, but in real time, it's not when you're trying to get them to engage in this other topic. So where it's like, you don't want to quash that. At the same time, it's like that importance of teaching around like multitasking, the fact that like multitasking doesn't work. Our brains don't function that way. And it's really hard to keep students engaged, especially I feel like we rely so heavily on tech. We use Google Classroom for everything, and we use our resources online, and there's so much like writing that's done online that it's impossible to have eyes on all screens at the same time. So there's that level of trust that has to happen. But we're also dealing with, at the middle grades, very impulsive students who that tab's right there and they can access just about anything that they want. So it's like training and coming back to that over and over again, and also having some empathy with them, knowing that their brain's still developing. So it's easier said than done to be like, don't do that, when like we would be doing the same thing when we were 10, 11, 12 years old. So it's like that having patience with it and keeping it coming back to like curiosity and educating at any point that we can. But it's a struggle. Yeah. Every day it's something we're saying, like, close your Chromebooks, stay on task, close your Chromebooks, stay on task. So I feel like it's something we say often. Pass over to you, Katie.
Oh yeah, that really resonates. Even at the, early college level, this is a real big struggle. So just, you imagine that prefrontal cortex being even less developed in the middle grade student. And of course, like there's so much struggle with it. But for me in my classes, and also when I was teaching fifth grade, is like, there's norms for the function of the classroom, and these are so important. We talk about that a lot on here, but there's really particular ones for technology use. And like in all my classes, we spend a bit of time how are we going to use technology in here? What does it look like to have productive technology, and then also human lives? So I try to give them grace around if there's something really big happening and they need to have their phone out, just let me know. Like if someone's having surgery, like just tell me, and you don't have to tell me the details, but just tell me you need to have it out. I said, there's going to be a time in this class when I have to step outside because of something one of my daughters needs. It's just, we're humans, but we also, I feel like we've lost that ability to communicate about what we need with technology, I guess. So how do we make that a norm? And then also one of my colleagues has just started doing with her college classes, like she's got her slideshow and she has a symbol. Well, let me back up. She noticed so much more engagement when the students did not have their computers out in class. So she makes certain parts of the class, she has a symbol for no computer. And so when that slide is up, she doesn't have to keep repeating it. It's there, and most people are doing it. So it's like the portion of the class that's no tech. And then there's the portion of the class where they're pulling up the docs and doing all the things. So I think that being like really intentional is very helpful, but it's certainly not a foolproof system by any measure. Mego.
Thanks. I love, something I just want to just say that I love hearing about the college level, like what's happening, because it's important for us to then reiterate that back to our kids too, right? This week, a lot of my students have lost the privilege of having the computer because of gaming or using it at inappropriate times from different teachers. So when it comes to me and my class, that means that those kids don't have access to technology, which is a natural consequence. And it's just an interesting conversation, right? For the kids around, okay, so how are you going to troubleshoot this? What do we need to do? Most of my tasks are there. It's all Google based, so I can print it out and it's not, we can figure it out. It's tricky to find primary sources. You don't have your Chromebook, but, and the thing that I keep talking to kids about is like, I'm really just trying to hammer home the executive functioning, the impulse control. And I just keep saying to them, like, if you know that it's so hard for you, delete that tab. Like, just get it off your screen. Like, the consequence, that it's really difficult for you to be productive in class if you don't have the tools that everyone else is relying on to get that work done. And so, yes, you can game all the time you want. Like, you can work around me. I'm not putting up Go Guardian right now because I have way better things to do with my time than to like watch you on a screen, like just it's not a good use of my time. But I'm grateful that I have that. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry about that. I've been really trying to talk to my kids, like if for every time you find yourself going to game, check yourself and like if you could keep track, like what if out of every 10 times, 2 times you didn't do it? And then the next time it was like, wow, I noticed that I'm less and less getting pulled into this to this loop, or I'm noticing times when I can and times when I can't. I don't know. I'm trying to find ways to help them be really conscious of when they're drawn to it and shutting it down, shutting the computer down, deleting the tab. I don't know. Just trying to figure out how to, especially for the really chronic kids, the kids for whom technology is, I don't know if it's a salve, if it's a calming thing. And so part of my data that I'm doing for this other class is just trying to do some research. Like, what is it that you need that's giving you that I can't get to you in some other way, right? Is it a fidget? Is it, what is it that you might need that's going to satisfy that itch without it being tech-based?
Thanks, everybody. I just kind of want to make a few sort of points that echo what folks are saying. And I'm not sure what I think about it, but I'm wondering how many of our kids are completely overwhelmed by the technology and how well we are teaching kids about all the little ins and outs of the programs that we are using. So for example, Google Classroom, if you don't archive your classes, right, a kid will pull up their Google Classroom and they will have um, 10 classes, some of which are from last year or last quarter because it's not archived. And that's confusing, right? And the other thing, if you don't teach your kids to turn off notifications, how many of you have looked at your students' email inboxes and they have 962 emails unanswered? And that's because it's sending them notifications that they've learned to not pay attention to, right? And so I wonder if the systems that we're giving kids or using with kids are far too overwhelming for those developing brains, and that they say, this is overwhelming, I'm going to go play a game or do something that's engaging to me. And I'm pretty concerned about that, actually, because I think that when kids aren't answering their emails or when they're not paying attention, they're missing information, missing connections, and worse, they're missing opportunities. And so that's sort of one issue, is like how aware are we of the impact of the technology we're using on our own students? And then the other piece also is norms. Katie mentioned this before. Do we have norms across classrooms? How many times has a student come in and you can't do that? Well, so-and-so lets me do that in this other classroom, or when I'm done all my work, I can do this. And because there's a lack of consistency and a lack of norms, I feel that causes dissonance within the students, and it allows them to find workarounds, or they find the cracks. And as you know, once a middle school kid finds those, it's pretty much game over. And the other piece to it too is you can have kids on technology and they look so engaged, and not one of them is doing what they're supposed to be, right? So are we using technology as a behavior management tool, right? Hey, they're quiet, they're on Google Classroom, I don't have to work, or they're on their Chromebooks. So that's a concern. And then I guess the other piece is just this idea of intentionality. I'm starting to do it where I'm giving kids specific focused time to work online. And other than that, I'm trying to avoid technology as much as I can. And when I do have them do the technology, I try and be as structured and clear as possible. this is what you need to do. Here are your resources. I expect you to be doing this, and then lay it out to them that way, so that they have the opportunity to use the technology, but not the opportunity to get distracted. I can't say that that's 100% successful, but that's one thing. That's where we are. Joe, I'd like to welcome you to the conversation. And I guess just real quick to jump in there, Joe, what are you seeing with your students and technology and digital citizenship?
Well, talk a long time on that, Don. So I'll try to be brief. Technology is a tool, and I try to treat the Chromebook like a pencil. And that's been my approach for a while. And so as far as, there's so many things I could talk. So public discourse, there's the phrase we've been passing around lately in class. How are you using the Chromebook in relation to how you're interacting with others? And are you using the Chromebook appropriately or inappropriately, that kind of thing. We have a Go Guardian that we use, which is a guard that stops use in ways that we are not supportive. And so we use that as a guideline while we're using Chromebooks. We don't use Chromebooks that much. We don't allow students to bring Chromebooks home. We are trying to limit it as much as possible. And what we have found is that the more we've limited Chromebook use and technology use, the more the people have turned back into folks who are engaging in what we're actually doing in the room together. There's more conversation, there's face-to-face, there's more interactions. We're able to monitor those interactions in ways that we can foster and support positive relationships. And that's been one of the highlights of this last year or so, has been walking away from the Chromebooks and having young people realize that's not how we're doing education. That's not the end all be all. So I guess I'm not opposed to them, but we use them only as a tool. And so I know AI is one of the things that's on the list to talk about. And I've talked with our tech folks, and maybe some of you have things you can talk about in relation to this, but we can't find a platform that is educationally supported that has AI as a tool for young people down here in Brattleboro. Maybe there is something. Canva, I use Canva a bit, and it does have an AI component that they say is acceptable for the teachers, for the adults, but they do not say that the young people should be using it. And so AI is a tool for young people in this educational environment. We haven't had anything pushed out to us yet that meets the criteria to make it acceptable. Young people are using AI in other settings and being the recipients of AI things in other settings. It's frustrating that we can't, or because I've been trying to work with the tech folks to start to have the young people do AI, and they're the drivers of it. They're the ones who are interacting with it, and they're the ones manipulating it. Right now, middle grades folks are being manipulated by AI. They're not the ones doing the manipulating. And then as far as AI for teachers, God, I'm opposed to that. We're already dealing with plug and play. You talked about this the other day, Don, where folks are getting these packaged programs and they're calling that my lesson plan. And there's no, what ownership do you have? If you're the person presenting and working with young people, what ownership do you have in something that you haven't created? I think of it as preparing a meal. Those of us who do lesson planning, we grab ingredients and we make the meal ourselves, and we're really invested in it. And that investment is presented to those who receive that meal from us. If we're buying fast food and handing that over to the kids, they get that message. So AI, just another version of fast food ingredients handed over to young people, and we call it curriculum. I'll stop.
Thank you, Joe. There's a lot there. We are going to talk about AI, and it's clear that there's not one uniform sort of vision of AI. But I just, before we do that, I wanted to bring your attention. Are folks aware of State Bill 284? And State Bill 284 is seeking to allow folks to opt out of using technology in schools. And it's also considering that online digital services providers are actually targeting students and getting their personal information and getting their data. And so part of that, I'll just read, this is from the text. Schools, school districts, and supervisory unions would be prohibited from utilizing social media for communication with students, directly or indirectly, prohibited from allowing students to access social media while the student is on school property, and prohibited from allowing students to access social media on school-issued electronic devices, so on and so forth. And I would encourage people to sort of read this bill, because it seems like it is a reaction to, what, if my kid doesn't want to be exposed to all that technology, and if I don't want to have the social media use, that this bill would eliminate some of those uses of technology. And this was presented to me by a colleague, and they said, I forget the term, it might just be a statement piece where folks want to make a statement about technology and how school districts are using that. But that is a bill as introduced, S284. And if you Google that, you will find information that is currently somewhere in the State House process, and just another point of view. So artificial intelligence, AI, we've been hearing about it prominently, I think, since November of 2022, when ChatGPT, which was a product of a company called OpenAI, and ChatGPT introduced a free platform where you could access different models and different uses of AI. And to the best of my understanding, that was sort of a focus, and that was available. But AI, in fact, has been used and all around us for quite some time. That includes when you're typing a Google Gmail and it presents text that you can use. Platforms like Grammarly use AI to help edit, and sort of large language models have been around us for quite some time. Also, the algorithms, if you go online and you start Googling or shopping, and then it starts presenting you similar products, that's all sort of a function of artificial intelligence. However, with ChatGPT, this seems to have reached a new level. And then also, not only ChatGPT, but there's a wide range of platforms where you can create pictures and create music and image, all sorts of computer-generated material. It is coming into our classroom, both as a tool we can use and as something that is being, at least we're being encouraged to figure out how it works and how it can help our teaching. And I just want to hear from you folks, what's your initial take on AI, and what do you think might be one benefit and one pro and one con for AI as you're currently seeing it? So we can start with, let's go with Katie Farber, and then Kevin, Meg, and then Joe. Again, what's your initial take on AI, and a pro and a con?
just those questions, huh, Don? Just the small ones. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of thinking with the education department about AI, and at first was pretty skeptical about it in curricular design. Like I think about, and I talk to my curriculum classes about being, we're craftspeople really of an experience based on a set of standards or learning objectives, and that we want that to be based in community. We want that to be creative and integrated and engaging and all of the things. And we all have been working toward that, especially in middle grades education. All of that said, I had one of my colleagues come up and present to us how she uses Chat GPT to help her make a learning scale that's formatted in a certain way with categories that she wants, and how it takes that clerical work that like sometimes really frustrates me on docs where I can't get the spacing and things right. And it made the first draft of that for her. And so, yes, what do you lose there? You lose some of that process, which we know is important. You lose some of that thinking around what you're creating that's important. And I watched her sort of go back and then change those categories, and she had a place to start. So what I think the benefits for AI are some of that more clerical work that you end up doing can be, the places where you can use it for that. But you also run the risk of losing that personality and that connection. And I really don't want to see that happen. So I feel like for instance, I feature a woman or BIPOC scientist every class for my science classes. And sometimes I Google those to try to figure out who that is. And sometimes I put it into Chat GPT because I just need like a big list, and I need to like just do that quickly and then understand present that to class in like a 3-minute time span. You know what I mean? So it helps with things like that. Let's see. I think that's what I wanted to say there, is that it's a starting spot. Oh, I know. Teaching people the ethics, though, is really critical in this. I unveiled it in a curriculum class and talked about how it can be helpful. And then I've had somebody like turn in a paper with a lot of chunks of it being written by AI. So you've got to really communicate like how do we use this as educators in a way that's ethically responsible, in a way that we're giving credit to it, just like you would any academic source. If you're using it, like, you have to cite it, like you have to cite the source. Versus just passing it off as your own, as I've seen happen. So those are the conversations I'm having with folks around how to use it ethically.
Yeah, God, that's two really big questions. Yeah, I think about the pros. We just shared a couple weeks ago, one of our former students who's a 10th grader now. He was just awarded the Congressional App Challenge by Becca Balint, and produced this app called LexiScan that's it's AI generated, and in short, like, he was talking to one of his friends who has dyslexia, and he's like, I want to come up with something that's going to help you out here, and develop this app where you can take a picture of anything and it reads it to you. And then he's programming it now, like the next steps are to do it in different languages. And for me, I'm like and I was coming back to like the technology use piece. Made me think about this earlier too, because he was one of those kids who was always doing something like coding or something separate and not being on task, if you will. But like those opportunities in class that he was taking, like, do we want to quash those and look at what he just produced now? It's something that he's passionate about. He dove into. And I would like to think that all the work and talk we do around sustainability and the developmental goals of having empathy then like bridged really nicely when he was at this point where he's like, I care about this, something that my friend's going through, and I'm developing something to help you that uses AI. So I'm like, pros for me is, yeah, like I think it's there to definitely help. And I think our students could potentially know how to harness it in the right way, and could have some remarkable outcomes that we couldn't think of before. And yeah, that like clerical, like stuff like Katie was talking about, we think we're always getting all this data, especially behavioral data and iReady data and everything else. And it's like, we admire it all the time, but it's like, nobody has the time to sit down and come up with next steps for all these kids. I'm like, what if we use AI generated next steps, and then like we do our thing in the trenches, and take that on. I think that's something that could prove beneficial. The cons, I love, like, to Joe's point earlier, it's like, who owns this thinking, and what are we like, who's doing the work here, doing the legwork? Are we losing out on that process? and just like having that autonomy of thought, of like, you know, if we're going to be just having something else generate thoughts for us, like what's the purpose? You know, like what are we doing anyway? Like why bother some AI is doing it for us. Like what's our role in it? But also makes me wonder, like, what kind of conversations were they having decades ago when the internet came out? And it's like, what are we doing in school? And kids can just Google the answer. Like, what's our role now? And like, we figured that out. Like, and it was like that next kind of pushing against the envelope of what's the role of teachers? What's the role of education? Now that we have this thing that you can access any information, like, why do we bother teaching if the kid can just Google it? It's like, again, our role comes back to that. You know, we need to teach kids how to have empathy. We need to teach kids how to be super critical thinkers and think deeply about things. And it's like kind of keeps coming back to that. Like, it's going to look different. It does look different already. It's going to keep changing. So it. I know it's hard, but it's like, instead of, I know it's going to be, you know, there's things we need to push against, but at the same time, like, if it's here, just like the internet, it was here. You know, we had to figure out how did our role change? I'm saying, how did our role? I wasn't a teacher when that came out, but how did the role of teaching change when that came up? And it's like, what do we do about it? And what are we hoping, you know, for our kids and our future? I think there's a lot of potential that can be unlocked, but it's scary because, as we know, if something else is doing the thinking that doesn't have a heartbeat, it's like, what's that all about too? And how are we grappling with some of those bigger pieces?
Kev, I love that. Literally my first professional development goal was something about the World Wide Web, and I literally spelled out World Wide Web. And I look back on that, it just cracks me up. Um, so I had a situation, a month ago after winter break. Kids came back and we were doing just like a little writing piece around what they were reading. And I asked them to do a book recommendation. And I had like 3 or 4 students that just full send plagiarized the thing. They went out and got it. Somebody else wrote a nice, and the thing was that they didn't change the font. They didn't change they didn't try hard enough to really sneak it in. And so I confronted them and we talked about like whose work was it. And so then I went to our DLL person and I said, and there was a conference that folks were going to around AI. And so with my DLL guy, I was asking students as part of this unit to create inquiry questions. And so with the DLL, Tim O'Leary, he put together this lesson that gave permission for kids to use AI. And so to create inquiry questions on their 20th century research. And so we use Goblin, ChatGPT, and Perplexity, and he created it in such a way that kids weren't creating their own online tools and or they weren't giving away any personal information. And it was actually a really interesting conversation with kids because they first had to come up with their question on their own, just on paper. And then they could put it into these tools and see, oh, it made it sound more sophisticated, but then they had no idea what the question was asking. And so then it was like, okay, put it in more kid-friendly language. And it actually ended up meeting their original question more closely, right? So I think the thing that I keep thinking about is like, how do we lean into the tools that they are going to access anyway, in some way, and provide the structure that lets them understand the limitations of it, understand that this isn't your language, this isn't your thinking, right? And then they had to go, now they're sitting in these fish bowls and we're having conversations about what they learned on the research that they were doing. And you can tell the kids that really understand the research that they've had to do, and the kids that didn't lean into that weren't as productive, I guess, in the research. And so anyway, I worry about them not developing the similar to what I'm seeing in class around engagement or around gaming, is just the discipline around it. When is it something that I can use as a tool, like I would use Google as a tool, and when, if I'm leaning so strictly on it that I'm not learning anything. I'm not the one owning the learning. So it's been interesting.
All right, I'll try to. There are a couple things. What's good? I used in Canva. There's a AI component to it, and I used that and I put a prompt in, and the prompt was describe uh, how an amendment is added to the Constitution in middle grades language. And what came out was really pretty good. And then I put at the bottom where I got the information from, and I packaged it up and I gave it to the students and said this, and tried to use that as, here's an example of how AI can be used to help you. It's all about writing a good prompt and getting the prompt structured in a way that the information that comes back actually addresses what you're trying to get it to do. I then put my name in and asked it to give information out about Joe Rivers from Brattleboro, Vermont. And I guess there's too many Joe Rivers out there. And so what came back from AI was a gobbledygook of maybe 4 or 5 different people. And most of the description did not apply to me. And so I shared that with the young people too and said, so here's AI is a tool, but I try to use an analogy of it's like driving a car. You're driving a car, you have to have skills, you have to be able to make that car go where you want it to go and then get to the place you're trying to get to. And if something happens, you're the one driving it and it's on you. It's your accident that you just had. And sometimes the young people want to blame Google. They want to blame Google or they want to blame AI. They want to say, well, I put this in and this is what came back out. It's the machine's fault. It's Google's fault. It's AI's fault. That's the next step of conversation that I'm having with the young people is just how do we pull information either from AI or from the research tools that are out there and then own it and say, well, I'm the one that's putting this together and presenting it as factual. AI, I think, is just another step in that already the struggle that I have with people using the internet as a way to gather information and how the internet just copies and pastes websites one after the other. And so then students find 3 or 4 sources that say the same thing, and each one of them is wrong because they just copied and pasted one another. That happens over and over again. And AI is just pulling from that pool of information and replicating that problem. So there's positives to it. The presentation it gave around how an amendment is created for the Constitution was a really nice 6 paragraphs that summed it up, and that was great. And then there's the other side of who's responsible for the information that comes back through the internet or through AI that is not correct. And when young people present that and say that's what they found, how do we get to that issue?
Not really sure where to start, but I think what I need to do is just write down what I think about AI every month or every 2 months, and then just see how that changes. I would say that right now, one of the pros of AI is that it's making me love reading books and that it's making me want books in my hand way more than I want to be staring at technology. And one of the cons with AI is that I see for teachers, I call it sort of this initiative exhaustion. I'm actually looking right now at the Zoom screen, and there's this thing called AI Companion, and it's telling me AI Companion features have been enabled in this meeting. And how long do I have to spend learning about those AI Companion features just in Zoom so that I can, I don't know what. So what's the benefit for me? Google has the AI, and so how do I have to learn in Google to use AI in classroom correctly? And I just see every time I hear about teachers and AI, I see more teachers doing more work to some end. That said, there is, I don't know if you saw that slideshow I passed along, but there's this thing called Chat PDF, which is if you make any document into a PDF, you upload it into Chat PDF, and you can write something like, please create 4 multiple choice questions that validly assess this text with the answers. 2 seconds, boom, there it is. And so it can be quite a time saver. And then the other piece to that is, do I actually own the understanding, or did I farm out the understanding to a piece of technology that will allow me to assess whether the kids understand it, but do I have the nuances of that information that I could lead a class discussion on, different parts of that. So I think Kevin mentioned this idea of autonomy of thought. I'm thinking about that quite a bit, but I'm also thinking, when I consider AI, it's a language-based model, right? And so what are we losing by turning over these things to AI? What part of our culture, what part of our interactions, what part of our humanity could we see erode based on the AI? And again, just from a teacher's point, it seems like we're going to have to do more before we're going to be able to do less, because there's this learning phase that you have to go through. And so how are we going to be able to do that and make the most use of it in the most efficient time that we can? And somebody else mentioned this idea of discipline around AI. I think that's really important. And I think the example that Joe gave is also really important, showing students the good and the not so good, and then having them ask, questions about it. But I also believe that this is happening in schools. It's happening, we want conversations, we want discussions, but it's the AI is happening much more quickly than that, right? And so how can we slow down our understanding and our use of AI so that it's appropriate, it's ethical, it's responsible? At the same time, kids go outside of the classroom and it's right there for them to use at any time. And then the last thing I'll just say is, Joe mentioned the idea of prompts. What is interesting about AI is the different things that people ask it. And those things it's so interesting. And I'm so curious where people, I would never think to Google myself an AI. Who is Don Taylor of Williston, Vermont, in AI? Like, I mean, that's not something I would think about. And so is that part of the creativity too, that we can be asking it all these different questions and then using it as a creative force for good? And so, as I mentioned previously, I think what I really need to do is just start writing down my opinion of AI and just going back and revising and reviewing that to see how that opinion changes based on my experience with it. It is February. For some of us, it is I don't know if you have vacation next week or in 2 weeks, but our vacation is almost upon us. I think I can empathize with how you are feeling now. And so I want to end today with just one question. Actually, 2 questions. One is, what question do you have about AI? Like, what's a question you have about AI? And we're not going to try and answer it. And then what is something you are looking forward to as the days get longer and maybe some of the cold weather starts to diminish, maybe just a little bit? Okay. We'll start with Joe, Meg, and Katie. Again, a question you have about AI, and then something you are looking forward to as we escape the grasp of winter, hopefully.
All right. So for AI, when are we going to have the opportunity for young people to manipulate AI in a structured setting as opposed to being manipulated by it, which seems to be what's going on now. And then for the change in seasons, today was the first day I got to go outside with the pup and not have my headlamp on as we're doing our morning stroll. And it's really cool. That's one of those, all right, this is the shift. We're going from headlamp time to getting the sun out again. So I do look forward to that. And it's here.
I don't have, I have so many questions and I don't have a specific question to ask AI. I think I'd want to know from AI, what does AI think about its role in the classroom? What does it say about, what does it want? I'm just curious about this. What does it want us to know about how to teach kids how to use AI? I don't know. And I guess something I'm looking forward to for break is, or just in the changing seasons too, is really just finding as much time as I can to get outside. I didn't realize how much I was relying on it this fall as a mood stabilizer, and I need it. I need it. I need back.
Oh yeah, I think that would be me. I have so many questions about AI. I really appreciated hearing Kevin talk about the uses of AI that are positive and the way that was serving that student. And I love that. And I don't know if you all saw that picture, but it was a visually impaired man taking selfies where AI was helping identify like two heads in the frame, like helping him aim so that he could have pictures of his life. And it was beautiful. So I want more of that. And I also want to know how we can control for the biases and stereotypes that exist in society. Like, how do I know that AI is notoriously having trouble with this? And I really feel like we've got to fix that problem, which is already, I'm sure, having an impact on young people. And then looking forward to, I'd say exactly what Meg is saying, that we just have, there just seems to be much more space and energy when it's a little bit sunny after 5. And I'm just so thankful for that.
All right. I guess just one question I have is, when do I know that AI is being used in my own life, and when is it not? So, and what can I trust? So, is an article being written by AI with the assistance of AI or by a human, and does that make a difference? So that's one thing. As Joe mentioned, how am I being manipulated by AI? I'm not sure, and so I'd like to know more about that. And then, for many of you, probably there's been a lot. It seems like there's been a lot of colds and kind of illness going around, and I'm just excited for a little bit more sunshine, like everybody said, for sugaring, to be able to get outside, and then just the longer days makes such a huge difference around here. And it seems I I thought I read something where we had so many days of just like sort of the monochrome gray, and then we had one day of sunshine. It was like, oh my gosh. So that's something I'm looking forward to as well. I want to thank everybody for their time. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. And for those of you going on break in the coming weeks, I hope you have time to relax and enjoy. Don't forget that the conference, the middle grades conference, is on March 9th. We're looking forward to that. The family conference is the following week on March 12th, and away we go. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for your contributions, and we will talk to you soon. All the best.
Thank you.